What's going on, guys? So we've been talking about the Sony A7C Mark II for a couple of videos right now, but now we gotta talk about the Sony A7CR, a 61 megapixel Sony A7C type of form factor that apparently is going to be announced in conjunction with the Sony A7C Mark II. Let's go. Welcome back to the channel, and yes, the Sony A7C Mark II apparently is going to be announced sooner than later, and it could be in a couple of months from now. But Sony Alpha Rumor is revealing new information from one of their trusted sources that this camera may also have a brother, and this brother is going to be the R version, having a 61 megapixel, apparently using the same sensor from the Sony A7R5. Now, everything is great and dandy, but we are talking about a high megapixel camera. 33, in my opinion, is a higher end megapixel range, and now a 61 megapixel camera, even higher resolution. Do we really need these two resolutions in the same form factor camera, pretty much almost in the same camera? In my opinion, if you ask me, if you offer me both cameras, I'm gonna go with a 33 megapixel because I do like the image quality from the Sony A7 IV. The 33 megapixel, I think, is a great compromise, you know, in between resolution, low light performance, and image quality. Now, the Sony A7R5, I own this camera as well, and I love it. It does struggle a little bit more when it comes to low light performance, and in my opinion, I think that someone that's gonna go for higher megapixel, having the Sony A7R5, most likely, you know, is someone that's gonna be taking this camera in a much more professional environment, would prefer a camera with better ergonomics and a better EVF, if you ask me. Now, what I think is that this rumor may actually be something that I was actually editing right now, because I'm doing a video about the Sony RX1R Mark III. And I think that this is a camera that is much needed right now. And I wish that the rumor actually talked about that Sony was going to be introducing the Sony A7C Mark II and a higher megapixel super compact camera such as the Sony RX1R Mark III. Now, why is this camera so important for Sony, and why they should consider releasing this camera if they are not working on it right now, or if this camera is gonna be the higher resolution? Well, number one, the Leica and the Fuji cameras, specifically talking about the Q line and the RX100 line, have been cameras that have become in the past year incredibly popular. You cannot get these cameras anywhere. Fuji has stalled all the production of the camera because they can catch up, but in my opinion, they are reworking on a new version of the camera. But that's for another video. And the Leica Q3, which was recently introduced, you cannot get it anywhere. I was lucky enough to get my hands on one. Now, if you want to get any of this camera, you're going to have to pay, in the case of the Fuji, double the price, and the Leica probably in the neighborhood of the $8,000, $7,500 if you can find one on eBay right now. For this reason, I think that Sony needs this particular camera because they have been tapping into pretty much every single segment. They have been tapping into the vlogging segment with a ZV line, and we have a 1-inch sensor camera, we have an APS-C ZV, and we have a full frame camera such as the ZV-E1. Also, when it comes to hybrid shooting, you know, great for photo, great for video, we have the A7 line, and we have it in all kinds of flavor. And even those that want to tap into cinema, Sony has given us the FX30 and the FX3, which is the camera that doesn't depart too much from the A7 experience. But Sony is still lacking in a camera that can actually compete directly with the Fuji X100V, for example, and the Leica Q3 right now. And the only camera that they have is the RX1R Mark II, which is a camera that's going to run you brand new today, $3,500. What a best time to release that camera than right now. And since I've heard that Sony Alpha Rumors mentioned that they are going to be releasing the Sony A7CR, I thought maybe it's the RX1R Mark III. Now, let me tell you what the difference between the Sony A7C Mark II and the Sony A7CR may be. And I think the Sony is going to be introducing for the first time, whether it is a Sony A7CR or an RX1R Mark III, for the first time, they're going to be introducing internal storage, because you're talking about 61 megapixel camera, and someone that's going to need those 61 megapixel is someone that's going to be taking photography seriously, someone that is going to be probably making larger prints, someone that is going to be cropping heavily, someone that is going to wanting to take this camera in a much more professional way, right? Even though the 33 megapixel is just fine for professional work as well. Once again, a camera right now with one SD card slot is a camera that a lot of people have hesitated, has skipped them altogether, perhaps, gone to another Sony cameras, or perhaps have gone to other offerings from other camera manufacturers such as Fuji, Canon, Nikon, and so on. So Sony is very much aware of this, and I think one way to mitigate the form factor of keeping the camera compact while giving us dual storage is to building one storage in the camera, at least 64 megapixel. And I have right here my lovely Leica 11. This camera has a built-in 64 megapixel and one additional SD card slot. So I can actually have redundancy in this camera. I can record to both, one to the car, one to the internal. Now, Sony has been one of the companies that also they manufacture their own storage. So this is the perfect storm for Sony to release a camera such as the RX1R Mark III, or if they're gonna go with the Sony A7CR, right? So because of that, Sony has the best autofocusing out there of any company, and we can argue about that, but in my opinion, it's the best autofocus out there, and I test a lot of cameras. They have, some of the best technologies out there in the cameras, and they are the king of sensor making. So Sony could actually make the perfect, tiny, compact, portable, professional camera once and for all with dual SD or internal storage and an additional SD card slot. Now, the reason why I think that the RX1R Mark III is really important right now is because, like I mentioned before, Sony doesn't have a product that competes with that niche, with those people wanting those retro-looking camera that are super compact, no grip, because ergonomics, when it comes to paying more, is not important anymore. Look at this, no grip whatsoever, but I mean, I love shooting with this camera. Yes, I think that, that camera is imminent to happen. And if it's not gonna happen right now, most likely could happen at the end of the year, but definitely is going to be happening sometime soon because Sony is aware and these cameras have taken the industry by storm. We may see the Sony A7C Mark II with all the specs that we mentioned before, pretty much all the specs from the Sony A7IV. And now we have this brand new information about a Sony A7CR. And in my opinion, this camera is gonna have internal storage. And I think that that is going to be the way that you're gonna attract people to a 61 megapixel camera that is compact. Because if the camera is gonna be just more high resolution, I think, and probably higher price, I think that a lot of people are gonna stick to the Sony A7C Mark II with a 33 megapixel, and I will be one of those because I already have the Sony A7R5. And if I want that much more megapixel count when it comes to Sony cameras, at least I will prefer something more comfortable, better EVF, and so on. Now, when it comes to body, like I mentioned before, we're gonna see the same exact body after Sony A6700. Sony's gonna do something similar as the FX3 line, basically changing sensors and some of the codecs and the options in the camera, but the body is gonna be the same. That means that we're gonna have the front dial, and we all gonna be happy with that. So, what do you think, guys? Would you like to see a Sony A7CR 61 megapixel, or you would like to see an RX1R Mark III instead? Let me know in the comments down below, and let me know what you think about Sony finally introducing internal storage in these cameras. Until then, I'll see you in the next video.